Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, welcome back to Youth Challenges. For those of you that have just joined us, prior to the break, we were talking about social media, in particular the negative effects of social media on the youth today. So, we've spoken a lot about the issues. Now it's time to talk about some solutions, if there are any available. And we still have with us in the studio Mr. Aziz. Mr. Aziz, prior to the break, we were talking about some of the cons of social media. We did speak about some of the benefits, but more so our focus was on the negatives. So the question that I want to ask is, what are some of the warning signs that social media is having a very negative influence on one person's life? So for example, what are some of the warning signs that I should pick up on that social media is negatively impacting my life?
Yeah, well, it could be several things. I mean, first of all, the amount of time that people spend on social media means that they have less time for other, productive tasks. It could be to do with their work, could be to do with their studies. So what that would mean is that they're probably falling behind, in their educational courses. They're falling behind with their work, and the other thing is that the amount of time they do spend probably is producing work which is not quite good quality. So and also in terms of interpersonal interactions, they may perhaps talk less to relatives and friends, and if they've been, particularly if they're young and they've been affected by the contents of social media, which normally their age range wouldn't be allowed to see, so their behaviour perhaps would become a bit withdrawn.
Yeah, fair enough, Mr. Aziz. That is a very fair comment, and so that answers my question insofar as what individuals can do themselves to help themselves stay away, well, not stay away, or reduce the negative effects of social media on them. Now, I would argue that there are many parties involved who can assist with a social media addiction, namely parents, teachers, and more so social media companies themselves.
Yeah.
So before we get to social media companies, let's talk about parents and teachers. What can parents and teachers, who obviously have a role of mentorship and a position of power over a young adult, a teenager or a child, what can they do to reduce the negative effect that social media is having on the child?
Yeah, as you know, there are certain things in place. Parents can keep an eye on what their children are looking at. I think probably one of the most common types of techniques that parents use is to limit the time, and say that their children can only go on social media for an hour a day or perhaps slightly more, and that will, if that is followed properly, that should have a good effect. Apart from that, I think if children are educated as to the negative effects of social media, because ideally you want a situation where they themselves, in fact, stop using it or limit it drastically.
Yeah, definitely. And just before that, I mentioned social media companies. Now, there is a big question which has been discussed in the media quite a bit, and it's even discussed on social media, ironically, is that are social media companies doing enough to prevent harm caused to viewers, right? And in short form, I would argue that social media companies are not doing enough, and there needs to be a bit more regulation behind social media. For instance, if I was 12 years old, right, I can register for a social media account, and if there is a requirement to be over 18, you can simply push your date of birth back and make yourself appear of the age to have a particular access. And that just comes to show how easy it is for young people to have access to social media and see content which is above their age range.
Yeah.
And that content is what is most likely to be most harmful to said individual.
Right.
Now, on top of that, the way certain social media platforms work, namely TikTok, and not just TikTok, TikTok may have, of course, I can't state with guarantee, but TikTok, in my experience, was one of the first platforms which launched the short form videos, 10-second videos, short videos you can click through. And then I feel like all of the other apps, Facebook, Instagram, you got Instagram Reels, you got Facebook Stories, you got WhatsApp Stories, you have YouTube Shorts. They all introduce this concept of short videos which you can just flick through. And what it is that the more you flick through and you like a video, so say for example, I'm flicking through my social media, I like a video of this cricket match or this shot that was played in a game, and I like that video. What will happen is the algorithm picks up on the fact that he liked that video, so we should send him more content which is similar.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because it means that you see relevant material that you want to see. You might be interested in a crime podcast. You click on it, you like it, and then you come up with more crime podcasts. But the problem with that is the algorithm simply shows you what you want to see, and sometimes what you want to see may not be the best thing for you to see.
Yeah.
Especially, for example, if you're a teenager, you might be flicking through and you find yourself in a very grey area of social media, and because you liked a particular video, you flicked through a number of videos, or you opened up a particular profile, you will continue to see that content, and that content may be harmful for you. That content may not necessarily be for your eyes. For example, you can find a 13 or a 12-year-old listening to very explicit rap music on social media platforms.
Yes.
And just because they liked it, they will keep those particular videos be pushed towards their algorithm, and they will continue to watch it. And what happens is, that is why there is a need for social media companies and platforms to increase the amount of regulation and the amount of monitoring, so they can censor content, so they can look out for especially more vulnerable people. And there is such a widespread case of cyberbullying which also takes place. You've got people hiding behind a fake social media account, messaging someone else. There could be a case of verbal abuse. It could be a case of actually manipulating that person to visit a particular area and then robbing them, for example. Many cases have taken place as such. Or it could be a case that someone's hiding behind social media and they message someone and they convince them to send some money to them, thereby a fraud or a scam, which also takes place on social media. So of course, if these things are taking place to such a high degree, there is definitely a need for more governance. That's my opinion, Mr. Aziz. What do you think in terms of social media companies? Are they doing enough or are they not?
Yes, that's a very important question, and one of the more prevalent negative results of social media are what we call scam romances. A lot of women have been basically scammed by people on social media who pretend to have a genuine interest in them, and then end up siphoning lots of money from them. It's happened so many times. And I've acted for a TV presenter where she had like over 60,000, well, quite a lot of money actually, was taken away from her, and it was a long slog, but we managed to get the money back in the end.
Yeah.
But I think normally, if she had gone to the police or anything, it would have been very, very difficult for her to get that money back. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it would be, because they're hiding behind a social media which does not belong to them. So I can imagine it'd be very difficult. And it's not just females. Unfortunately, many people, young people, vulnerable people, elderly people, a lot of people fall under the they get trapped by these con artists, and they end up losing a lot of money. And it's not just money, it really affects their own mental health, because when they're a victim of such a big scam.
That's right. And of course, there have been quite a few people scammed by looking at wonderful offers of holidays very cheaply.
Yeah.
Lots of people falling for that, which is a great shame, because normally that affects the whole family.
Yeah.
You know, if they paid for a holiday and the children are looking forward to going on a holiday, and then it turns out it's a scam, and that's very sad that these things happen. I wish that the social media companies would have a more stringent way of sifting what's genuine and what's actually fraudulent.
Yeah, and I think in order to have that level of protection, the first thing is actually recognizing your position of power. Now, before I go into that, I'd like to mention it's almost a compliment to banks, right? High street banks especially. If you have been a victim of a scam or a fraud and it wasn't your fault, many banks will actually refund you your money, provided that you tick the right terms and conditions and the boxes. Now, that's because banks recognize that there is a degree of regulation or governance that they could exercise to prevent such a thing from happening. They recognize a degree of power they hold in preventing such circumstances. So, for example, if I try to make a payment, say, for example, well, not myself, thankfully, but say someone was a victim of romance fraud and someone living somewhere abroad messaged them and said, why don't you send me, £6,000 to this account, and I need it to, for example, come and visit you in the UK, for example. And when they try to send that money, the bank is in more than a position of power to actually prevent that payment from going through. They can stop the payment. They can say, look, this is a scam. We can't let you do it. They can block the account, which they do on certain occasions. But sometimes these things just go under the radar and they take place. And banks will assist wherever they can because they recognize accountability. Social media, on the other hand, doesn't. So, for example, you can be contacted by someone on social media. You can pay £30 or £40 for an item, and the item never arrives. All that's happened is you've been scammed and you lost 30 or 40 quid. And social media will do absolutely nothing to assist you. They don't have like a central pot where they say, look, if you become a victim of fraud or scam because of our platform, we will refund you. They don't have a system as such because they don't recognize the accountability that they should have. They don't have that degree of governance, and they're in a position of power, and there should be some sort of, I wouldn't call it a benefit, it's more so a relief or compensation provided to its customers who are indeed the viewers. And that is why there is definitely a need for social media platforms to actually monitor what is going on and to prevent, cyberbullying, to prevent defamatory statements, to prevent scams and all sorts, and to prevent harmful material being pushed out to vulnerable people and to young innocent adults. Now, we've spoken about what parents could do, what individuals could do themselves. We've spoken about social media platforms and companies alike, and we mentioned quite a bit that social media is very distracting, especially for students. So not only is it distracting to their education and perhaps their career, it's also distracting to their social lives, their communication skills, their confidence. And what I want to ask, Mr. Aziz, is what can young people do to better their lives online and offline? How can they balance their online and offline life to make sure it doesn't have an effect on their real life?
Yeah, I think the thing to do probably is to be more strict in how they use social media. For instance, they should give themselves, if they want to look at social media, perhaps a good time would be to very early in the morning say to themselves, okay, if I want to look at social media, I've got to get up at 5 o'clock. Allocate that 1 hour to social media at 5 o'clock in the morning, and if they don't get up, then they don't see anything. And the later on in the day, they must have a rule that they cannot access social media unless it's 5 a.m. in the morning. And that way, you see, that will not interfere with their other things that they're trying to do, and at the same time, to encourage them to wake up early.
Yeah, no, definitely. I've never heard that before. So that's it's quite a neat trick there you've got, Mr. Aziz. So I imagine you're online at 5 a.m., is it?
Yeah.
But see, now that leads me swiftly into the next kind of subtopic, which is social media is so vast, right? You can choose what you want to see. I could wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and just look through, recent news. make myself up to date, keep myself up to date. What's happening in the world? You know, what's the latest commercial news? Is there any commercial news which affects my line of business or which affects my life? You know,
Yes.
Is income tax increasing or whatever it may be? What's the political situation? This is very informative stuff, right? You can keep yourself very well informed. So you are responsible for the content that you see to a degree. So youngsters especially, what you can do is actually you can use social media, which is a very, very useful tool. We must say, it may sound like we've been a bit pessimistic towards social media and we've spoken about a lot of negatives, but it does have a lot of positives. Aside from the entertainment element, it is a source of knowledge and it is a source of information. And as you've mentioned before, wisdom comes from knowledge and knowledge comes from reading. And you can find on social media many articles, many posts where you can read and increase your knowledge about various things because everything is on there.
Yes.
And it is up to you as an individual to look at things that benefit you. For example, you can spend 10 minutes looking at useless dancing videos, right? That have no productive effect on your life, that don't benefit you in any way. Or you can spend that 10 minutes reading through news about the economy. You can use that 10 minutes to educate yourself about, you know, a food crisis taking place somewhere in the world, or you know, several different things you can do. You can do it and you can just read about how bread is produced, for example, even though that might seem insignificant, but there's so much you can learn.
Yeah.
And using social media for your own benefit, it's your choice. It's up to you. And what I would encourage is, social media can also be used to better your education and to better your career prospects. For example, you've got apps such as LinkedIn. LinkedIn is basically like a virtual CV. You can upload your background, you can mention your education, your work experience, what jobs you've taken, what qualifications you have.
Yeah.
If you attended a seminar somewhere, you can post a picture of that seminar and talk about, you know, your key takeaways. I attended a seminar today and we spoke about gentrification, or we spoke about agriculture, or whatever it is, you know, the presenter spoke about. You can say, I attended this seminar and I learned this today. And you can kind of put it in a summary and people can see, look at this young person. He's very enthusiastic about what he's doing. He's attending these very educational things. He's kind of going beyond his studies and doing things in his own time, which are extracurricular activities. And that, as you mentioned, the job market is very fierce and it's hard to get jobs these days. So that kind of gives you the edge over the rest of the market. If you come across as enthusiastic from the get-go, an employer would definitely look at you as a stronger candidate.
Yes.
So just on that note, Mr. Aziz, what are some of the ways that young people can use social media in a positive manner so that it doesn't impact them negatively, but they can use it for their own growth?
Yes, that's right. I mean, often when you look at social media, often you actually you'll get some offers of courses. I've seen. You know, often I see in social media certain educational institutions will use social media to put out certain courses which I wouldn't normally be aware of. And I think that's at least one positive aspect of social media, that the young people should, if they can, you know, if they seize those opportunities, because often you often get the opportunity to go on a course which ordinarily you wouldn't be aware of. And some of them are short, some of them are perhaps specifically designed for certain type of education, and that's one very good aspect of social media, which I find is I have in fact even myself, you know, gone on seminars or courses which I've seen through social media, which I wouldn't normally have done. So that's one aspect. Secondly, I think you know, when you go through these TikTok, when you go through the videos, often you can see the ones that are really just like a bit of a joke or a bit of video, and you know, it's probably much easier to probably just flick past those and go on to those videos that actually tell you about world events, tell you about debates. I mean, there's certainly some very good debates that get posted on social media. You know, we got certain hosts like, you know, Mehdi Hassan and Piers Morgan. They have very, very, you know, enlightening discussions, which people find, you know, very, you know, enlightening in terms of the content. And that's what I would say: just try to stick to to the serious ones. You know,
Yeah.
forget about the jokey ones or the ones that take a long time before you know what they're talking about.
Definitely, Mr. Aziz, that is quite well summed up. And as we mentioned, the choice of what you see is yours, and you can definitely use social media as a force for good as opposed to a source for evil and as a tool for distraction. Unfortunately, Mr. Aziz, we've actually come towards the end of our episode, and the hour just doesn't seem enough. I was having a very interesting discussion with you, and there's many topics that we can talk about for ages, especially social media. It's so broad. But in any case, we have come towards the end of our episode, so I'd like to thank you for taking time out your busy schedule to come on show today and address the youth. And viewers, I'd like to thank you for staying tuned in, and we hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as we did. And until next time, take care of your family, of your loved ones, and we'll see you soon back on Youth Challenges. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.